Imagine this, friends. Let's make a bold assumption. Try to turn the clock back 20,000 years and imagine you are on the East African savanna. You are a hunter-gatherer of that era who has just caught an antelope and returned to the tribe. In this moment, would you share this antelope only with your sole partner? Or would you share this feast with the entire tribe? And when night falls, do you stay by one person's side because of a marriage contract? Or do you follow your instincts by the bonfire and sleep with anyone who catches your eye? That world had no marriage certificates, no private property, and perhaps not even the concept of father. But was that the true state of our ancestors' lives? If monogamy was not human nature in that savage era, then what force locked our perhaps restless genes into the besieged fortress of modern marriage? Today, let us strip away the cloak of civilization to explore the naked truth about gender relations. Hello everyone, the ultimate thought experiment to be discussed in this episode is monogamy consistent with human nature? The past year has been unofficially dubbed the year of the Great Split. We've watched iconic power couples call it quits one after another. Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck ended their fairy tale rekindling, while Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner shocked the internet with their sudden and messy breakup. Even long-standing pillars of stability like Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness announced their separation after 27 years. And it wasn't just them, even Natalie Portman, despite her picture-perfect image, saw her marriage collapse amid scandal. Watching these seemingly perfect Hollywood romances crumble, onlookers can't help but sigh. With divorce rates this high, maintaining a stable marriage seems harder than ever. First, looking at it from the men's perspective. These stinking men always love extramarital affairs and cheating. You men can never seem to control your lower halves. If you cannot be unwaveringly loyal, then why did you choose to get married in the first place? Looking at it from the women's perspective. Why is it becoming increasingly difficult to maintain a marriage now? Because women are becoming less obedient than before. In the past, when men treated their wives poorly after marriage, locking them at home to cook and raise children, while they went out to mess around from time to time, women back then didn't dare to ask for a divorce. At that time, if a woman asked for a divorce, she would have no way to survive. But now women are educated and go out to work. Therefore, they can no longer tolerate men's misconduct. I can support myself. Why should I suffer this indignation? This life is unlivable, it's not working. Divorce, as research in the United States has found, the main reason for the rising divorce rate in the US in recent years is the increase in women's education levels and economic independence. This forces us to consider, could it be that the reason traditional monogamy was able to persist in the past was simply because it was built on the foundation of the marginalization and oppression of women? This is not actually a new idea from modern sociologists and statisticians. As early as over 100 years ago, philosopher Friedrich Engels in his work, The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State proposed that current monogamy is not a marriage system consistent with human nature, but a system constructed by postnatal culture. It is built on the foundation of private property and the oppression of women. Engels adopted the theories of anthropologist Lewis Henry Morgan in his work Ancient Society. In prehistoric times, before humans entered agricultural society, our Homo sapiens ancestors lived a hunter-gatherer life. Humans at that time were not monogamous, but practiced a form of group marriage. That is, promiscuity. Men and women were equal. Women had sexual autonomy. Women at that time did not have so many heavy burdens when expressing their sexual desires. They didn't have to consider whether the other party had money, whether he was a second-generation heir, whether their astrological signs were incompatible, whether he was a scumbag. Women wouldn't consider all that. They might have sexual relations with anyone they fancied, and not just with one man. This is what is meant by promiscuity. Why were women at that time so uninhibited? Because it was a matriarchal society. A father was not needed to raise a child. Men were just sperm providers. After a woman slept with many men and gave birth to a baby, no one knew which man's seed it was. The child took the mother's surname after birth. The saying "knowing the mother but not the father" in matriarchal society refers exactly to this. Human tribes at the time generally practiced a form of primitive communism. Mothers did not raise children solely by their own strength. Uncles, aunts, and neighbors in the tribe would all come to help raise the children. Children were raised collectively by the tribe. Everyone relied on hunting and gathering to obtain living materials. There were no refrigerators back then. If there was anything delicious, everyone shared it. At that time, there was no concept of private property. So how did the group marriage adopted by human ancestors later turn into monogamy? Engels believed this was the product of humans acquiring private property. Between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, humans moved from hunter-gatherer society into agricultural society. Two phenomena appeared after entering agricultural society. First, men began to control economic power. Previously in hunter-gatherer society, humans obtained living materials directly from nature. Women picking fruits did not acquire less than men hunting. But after entering agricultural society, especially after the invention of the plow, men's advantage in physical strength was immediately transformed into an economic advantage. The division of labor between men and women in hunting and gathering turned into men working to support the family, and women staying at home to have children and cook. The second phenomenon that arose after men controlled the means of production was something appeared. That is surplus grain. This is private property. And this private property belonged to men. With private property, men began to ponder one thing. After I die, who should inherit the 180 caddies of rice and 20 cows in my house? It must definitely be passed on to my own children. But looking out at the village entrance, which of the dozen children running around is actually my seed? Thus, men entering agricultural society had an impulse to determine blood relations. So men locked women in the house, telling women they were not allowed to go out and show their faces. You just stay home and behave. You can only have relations with me alone, to ensure that the baby born from your belly is my seed. So in Engels' view, the current system of monogamy is not the product of love between men and women, but a property and economic system. The essence of monogamy is for males to pass their private property to their legal heirs. They monopolize females in an exclusionary manner, to ensure that the children women bear are the male's own children. Since then, men have implemented all-round control and oppression of women from body to spirit. Women have since been locked in the home, reduced to tools for childbirth. After Engels proposed this theory, it also encountered opposition from some scholars. For example, Finnish sociologist and anthropologist Edvard Westermark held a different view from Engels. He believed that monogamy was not a mating method that only existed after humans entered agricultural society. As early as the long hunter-gatherer era, the prevailing practice among human ancestors was monogamy. Monogamy is a mating system consistent with human nature. Opponents argue that the group marriage or promiscuity mentioned by Morgan and Engels is only adopted by lower animals. Higher animals rarely adopt this mating method. For example, the vast majority of birds adopt monogamy. Engels retorted that citing birds proves nothing, because we humans did not originate from birds. If we really want to argue, anthropoid apes are more closely related to humans. We should examine the mating methods of anthropoid apes more. But 100 years ago when Engels lived, the conditions didn't exist. Research on animals in paleoanthropology was very limited at the time. So Engels did not have much material to use as evidence. But today, zoologists, archaeologists, and anthropologists have provided us with much more material than in Engels' time. We now know several species under the hominidae family, besides us humans. There are gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and gibbons. Their mating methods differ. Gorillas are polygynous. Chimpanzees and bonobos practice group marriage. Orangutans and gibbons practice monogamy. Our close relatives adopt 3 different mating methods. So which of these 3 did our human ancestors adopt? In this episode, we will debate this big question. That is, before entering the civilized era. Ancestors living in the long hunter-gatherer era. Which mating method did they actually adopt? We will examine the mating methods adopted by 3 of our close relatives respectively. Namely polygyny, group marriage, and monogamy. To see which one is more likely to be the mating method adopted by our human ancestors. Before formally entering the discussion, let's set the rules of the game. The first approach is the evolutionary paradigm. Why drag evolution into a discussion on mating methods? Because evolution tells us that humans also evolved from animals. So if we want to examine what mating method fits human nature, we also need to examine the mating methods of other animals, especially species under the hominidae family that are more closely related to us humans. Since we are discussing human nature, we must distinguish between nature and nurture. Innate instincts are evolved, while acquired customs are constructed by culture. To examine the mating method that fits human nature, we need to examine the mating method adopted by humans before entering agricultural society. That is, before entering the civilized era. Because people at that time didn't have much culture. They lived more according to the instincts endowed by evolution. We need to know that our current human instincts evolved during the long hunter-gatherer society, not during the later civilized era. Anatomically modern humans have existed for 200,000 years. For these 200,000 years, the body of Homo sapiens has not undergone significant evolution. And for these 200,000 years, we humans lived in hunter-gatherer societies. Humans entering civilized society is a matter of just a short 8 to 10,000 years. Entering industrial society is a matter of just a short 100 or 200 years. Entering the so-called information society is a matter of the last few decades. Although our living environment has undergone earth-shaking changes, the evolution of our instincts is not as fast as environmental changes. The instincts in us modern humans are still evolved to cope with the living environment of the hunter-gatherer era. In other words, we modern humans are actually primitive people living in the information age. To use an analogy, some children growing up in the city today may never see a live snake in their lives. But if you bring a live snake with its fangs removed in front of his eyes, he will still instinctively feel afraid. This shows that fear of snakes is not a product of the civilized era. These are genetic memories left to us by our ancestors living in the hunter-gatherer era. So when discussing mating methods consistent with human nature, we cannot look at the settings of the civilized era, but must trace back to the hunter-gatherer era 10,000 years ago. The second rule of discussion to explain is that the method adopted in our discussion today is called abductive reasoning, different from the deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning we are familiar with. Abductive reasoning is where we first observe a series of facts. Then we need to find the most reasonable hypothesis that can explain these facts, working backwards to find the most reasonable explanation for these facts. This is a bit like a detective solving a case. What mating method our human ancestors adopted over 10,000 years ago? There is no direct evidence for this matter. The people of primitive society are all dead. Who can we ask? The evidence left behind is also not sufficient. Human ancestors lived in hot and humid East Africa, leaving almost no fossil evidence. It is precisely because there is no direct evidence that it is worth taking as a topic for this thought experiment program. To judge which hypothesis is more reasonable depends on 2 standards: comprehensiveness and consistency. Comprehensiveness means that if this hypothesis can explain more facts. Consistency means you don't have bugs yourself. Don't have facts that run counter to this hypothesis. We have proposed 3 competing hypotheses today. Let's judge together, you act as the detective to evaluate. First, let's introduce the first hypothesis. Polygyny. Simply put, it is one husband and multiple wives, or the harem monopoly system. Gorillas under the hominidae family adopt polygyny. The male gorilla leader who can fight the best in the entire gorilla tribe. That is, this alpha male monopolizes all females in the tribe. Other male gorillas who lose the fight remain bachelors. Although human ancestors may not have been like gorillas, where one male monopolized all females in the tribe, but it was at least an oligarchy. That is, a small number of men possessed all women, and the majority of men remained bachelors. If there really were human tribes with polyandry, one wife, multiple husbands, in history, it would definitely not be the mainstream. Because calculated mathematically, mammals adopting polyandry is very detrimental to the reproduction of the species. It would soon be eliminated by natural selection. Why say human ancestors adopted polygyny? Scholars have put forward a lot of solid evidence. First, looking at human sexual dimorphism, we can judge that humans are polygynous. Sexual dimorphism simply means the physical difference between the two sexes. The greater the difference in sexual dimorphism, the greater the degree of monopoly in polygyny. For example, elephant seals. A male elephant seal weighs 2 to 3 tons, while a female elephant seal weighs over 600 kilograms. The weight difference between male and female is more than 4 times. So the male elephant seal's harem has more than 50 females. The weight of a male gorilla is twice that of a female. So the gorilla's harem has 20 females. What about us humans? The average weight of human males is 20% higher than females. So derived from this, we human males should have 3 or 4 wives. The recently deceased father of sociobiology, E.O. Wilson, judged based on data on human sexual dimorphism that humans are a mildly polygynous species. Why can polygyny be inferred from sexual dimorphism? Because the winner marries all females, the loser stays single. It is always the largest and best fighting male who can win. Among his male offspring, it is still the largest and best fighting one who can win. After many generations, the males in the gorilla species will become heavier and heavier, while females do not have such selection pressure, so they keep their original size. Thus, distinct sexual dimorphism is formed. Species where the two sexes are similar in size are basically monogamous, like emperor penguins and gibbons. Polygynous species have a winner-takes-all rule. So the larger sex has intense intrasexual competition. This side has a relatively strong tendency towards violence. For example, male gorillas have a strong tendency towards violence, ready to swing their arms and get rough at the drop of a hat, while species adopting monogamy have very mild temperaments, because every individual among them can find a mate. Conversely, in species where females are larger, such as the jacana, females are more aggressive than males. Females often fight fiercely to snatch husbands. Back to the tendency for violence between the sexes in the human world. According to global statistics on violent crime, the relative ratio of violent crimes between men and women is 10 to 1. Violent crimes are almost entirely committed by men. Men have a very obvious tendency towards violence, usually loving action movies, war movies, fighting competitions. Men are combative and love violence. Why do men like violence more? Because male ancestors relied on fighting and snatching to get wives. Only those male humans with violent tendencies were selected by nature. Those peace-loving males left no descendants. In addition, scholars supporting the polygyny hypothesis also put forward another piece of evidence. Looking at DNA extracted from early human fossils, the diversity level of the Y-chromosome is low, while the diversity level of mitochondria is high. The Y-chromosome is only inherited from the father. Mitochondria are only inherited from the mother. This shows that we have more female ancestors and fewer male ancestors. This is obvious. A small number of men left genes. The rest remained bachelors and left no genes. This is very solid evidence for the polygyny hypothesis. There's also circumstantial evidence, the so-called Coolidge effect. Men have a refractory period after ejaculation, also known as sage mode. But if you immediately switch him to a different partner, this sage mode will disappear immediately. This also shows that humans are a polygynous species. The reproductive age of males can continue into middle age or even old age, while females stop menstruating relatively earlier. This is also circumstantial evidence for polygyny, because human ancestors adopted polygyny. This explains why these stinking men are always restless after marriage, because they are the descendants left by polygynous ancestors. Below we explain why early human ancestors adopted polygyny, but later humans universally adopted monogamy. Many people think that women oppose polygyny most fiercely. Actually, polygyny is beneficial to women to some extent. Women can have multiple choices. She can either marry a high-quality human male as a concubine, or marry a medium-quality man as his only wife. The ones who truly oppose polygyny most fiercely are not women, but men. Especially the vast majority of men in the lower and middle classes. But these weak men can't do anything about the alpha male. How did it later turn into monogamy? The first reason is technological progress. That is the appearance of weapons. Like throwing stones. If I fight you hand to hand, I'll be hammered to death by you. But standing 10 meters away, I can unexpectedly smash a stone on your head. With this stone, the alpha male becomes very wary. If 80% of the men in this society are bachelors, and every one of them is clutching a stone in his hand, this society is extremely unstable. Your wives will be raped, and you yourself will be hung from a tree branch. The second reason: humans are a social species. People need to cooperate to get things done. If 80% of single men in this society can't get a wife no matter how hard they try, then they will definitely not put in any effort. If you want these vast majority of men to involute, you have to promise them that hard work will get them a wife. This is a basic principle of management. To avoid being smashed by stones, and to allow the majority of men to cooperate and get things done, the strong men had to sit down and set rules with the weak men. They signed an agreement. Wives for you, put down the stones in your hands. If people want to enjoy peace and prosperity, then this society must suppress private violence. Promoting monogamy is a necessary condition. After every man gets a wife, to buy bags for the wife and milk powder for the children. The vast majority of men work hard at work and enjoy their wife and kids on a warm bed after work. They stop causing trouble. This is a typical Hobbesian line of thought. 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed that humans in the original state of nature lived in a poverty-stricken jungle society full of violence. In Hobbes' words, the relationship between people was like the relationship between wolves. Later, with the development of civilization, people felt that living in this jungle society where the weak are prey to the strong did no one any good. It was better for everyone to set a rule together, to hand over the right to exercise violence to a sovereign. We have had an episode on our channel diving deep into Hobbes and Leviathan. Everyone is welcome to listen in depth. Everyone is amiable. And I also promise you that I will only take one wife in the future. In short, humans in the original state were violent and very unequal. But with the development of civilization, humans tend more and more towards peace and equality. So although human nature is to adopt polygyny, under the shaping of civilization, the human mating method changed to today's monogamy. This is the introduction to the polygyny hypothesis. Next, let's introduce the group marriage hypothesis. Engels believed that in matriarchal society, women were sexually autonomous and had relations with unspecified males. Even in modern times, there are still some so-called modern hunter-gatherer tribes retaining the customs of matriarchal group marriage. For example, the Masua people living by Lugu Lake in the Sichuan Yunnan region of China. Their marriage system is called walking marriage. Men sneak into the woman's room at night to have sex. Economic relations are not considered. The children born do not need the man to raise them, but are raised jointly by the woman's relatives. After walking marriage, both parties can still freely walk marriage with others. The starting point of scholars supporting the group marriage hypothesis is different from that of polygyny. The starting point of polygyny is the Hobbesian original human condition of poverty and violence. But now more and more scholars believe that life in early hunter-gatherer tribes was much better than the life of farmers in later agricultural societies. The agricultural revolution had not yet started. The population of the Homo sapiens species was small. Vast land and sparse population. Resource-rich East Africa was enough to feed the entire tribe. As long as there was a sharp stone. Picking up meat left over by lions was enough to feed 10 people. So in the early hunter-gatherer era with vast land and few people, life was very comfortable. Anthropologists have calculated that on average, each person only had to work 3 hours a day. The rest of the time was spent on social entertainment, storytelling, romance, and mating. Now more and more scholars believe that the hunter-gatherer era was not an era of material scarcity. On the contrary, human quality of life dropped significantly after reaching agricultural society. The population explosion in agricultural society meant more consumption. The result was falling into universal poverty. Humans living in hunter-gatherer tribes had very rich nutritional intake. Jared Diamond, author of Guns, Germs, and Steel, said, "The agricultural revolution was the biggest mistake in human history." Yuval Noah Harari, author of Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, also cited this view. Scholars supporting group marriage do not agree with the Hobbesian original human condition. Life in the hunter-gatherer era was relatively affluent. There was no need for a father. The species under the hominidae family closer to human genes are chimpanzees and bonobos. Their sexual dimorphism is also similar to ours. But the mating method adopted by chimpanzees and bonobos is not polygyny, but group marriage. DNA sequencing found we have fewer male ancestors. This situation does not necessarily have to be explained by polygyny. Group marriage can also explain it. Hominidae species adopting group marriage all have sperm competition. A female has relations with many males. But in the end, she can only conceive the seed of one male. In this case, what males compete on is not whose arm is thicker, but whose performance in that regard is better. Chimpanzees and bonobos spend a lot of time having sex. The ratio of their testes to body weight is the largest among all hominidae species. Species adopting group marriage have sperm competition. So the male's ammunition depot must be abundant. The ratio of chimpanzee testes to body size is the largest among several similar species, while the species with the smallest ratio of testes to body weight is the gorilla. Because gorillas are polygynous, there is no need to compete with ammunition. The ratio of human testes to body weight is in between, far higher than gorillas. If the testes data is not enough to show that early humans also had sperm competition, there is another piece of solid evidence. That is, the ratio of human male penis size to body weight is the largest among all hominidae species. The special structure of the human penis lies in the coronal ridge at its head, which is used to scoop out sperm left in the vagina by other males during mating with females. The duration of each sexual act for human males is the longest among all hominidae species. Gorillas average 60 seconds. Bonobos average 17 seconds. Chimpanzees average 7 seconds, while humans average 230 seconds. Why do human males spend so long on each sexual act? It is to increase the number of thrusts to scoop out the competitor's sperm. Others rely on abundant ammunition, while we humans use longer penis size and longer sexual duration under the action of the coronal ridge to scoop out more competitors' sperm. So to this day, human males instinctively care particularly about their size and duration. Although under today's monogamy these serve no purpose. This is the genetic memory left to men by ancestors who participated in sperm competition. From the female perspective, scholars supporting polygyny say human ancestors were polygynous, so males prefer marital infidelity. But this doesn't make sense mathematically, because for every male cheating, there is a female cheating. This shows that our female ancestors practicing group marriage also preferred more new opportunities. There is another piece of circumstantial evidence, the so-called post-marital psychological boredom. The time for passion to dissipate is on average 18 months. This shows that in our instincts, we are meant to live a group marriage life. As a result, the current monogamy makes the couple both enter a long-term sage mode, boredom. How did group marriage later turn into monogamy? Engels believed it was because private property appeared after humans entered agricultural society. Monogamy is the product of patriarchal society. Here we add a Freudian reason. Human ancestors living in the hunter-gatherer era lived carefree lives. They were happy, yes, but civilization could not develop. According to Freud's view, the development of civilization must be based on sexual repression. If you have sex with different members of the opposite sex all day long, then why would you go to work or move bricks? Civilized people, because their sexual desire was repressed, transferred their excess sexual desire to work in artistic creation. In Freud's words, human sexual desire was sublimated. Monogamy repressed people's sexual desire. This is the necessary cost of the development of civilization. This is the introduction to the group marriage hypothesis. There are other scholars who believe monogamy is not a product of postnatal culture, but that as early as the long hunter-gatherer era, the prevailing mating method for humans was monogamy. Polygyny appearing in history was only a product of class differentiation after the agricultural revolution. Even in agricultural society, only 5% to 10% of men had multiple wives. The vast majority of people still followed monogamy. Evidence supporting the hypothesis that Homo sapiens ancestors followed monogamy must be found in our current human instincts. We have three typical instincts regarding marriage and love issues: jealousy, limerence, and attachment. Jealousy is completely instinctive. When you see your partner having intimate actions with others, you can't suppress the anger. Jealousy is an instinct that would only evolve in early humans under monogamous conditions. Limerence, also known as a crush. You are infatuated with a girl, your mind is always full of that girl. The whole world becomes a teleological system. Everything points to that girl. She is the giver of meaning. This feeling of infatuation is exclusive. You are only infatuated with that girl. Even if Sydney Sweeney and Margot Robbie wanted to take the initiative to date you, you wouldn't date them. Attachment is particularly obvious in many old married couples. Even if there is no longer a strong reproductive impulse towards each other, you just want to stay with the other person. There is a feeling of partnership. This shows that this is an instinct that could only evolve in early humans under monogamous conditions. There is also an argument based on human physiological characteristics. That is, the concealed ovulation of human females. The vast majority of mammals only mate during the estrus period. For example, chimpanzees only mate with high frequency when their red buttocks are swollen. But humans are strange, capable of having sexual behavior at any time. The ovulation period of human females is concealed. Men can't tell, and women themselves are not aware of it. Why did human females evolve concealed ovulation? That is because human children are too hard to raise. Human heads are particularly large. So humans are actually born premature. Human infants are in a state of total helplessness, unable to care for themselves for about 2 years after birth. After passing this state of helplessness, they still have to undergo 10 years of rearing to be self-sufficient. Knowledge related to survival needs to be taught orally and emotionally by parents. Such a heavy task of raising and educating infants is beyond the capability of the mother alone. At this time, there must be the investment of paternal love to raise this child. Females faced an adaptive task to evolve a trait to tie down the child's father. This is concealed ovulation. Because the ovulation period is unknown. If a man wants to reproduce, he must stay with his partner for a long time. Men are also afraid of being cuckolded by other males. So they have to guard their female partners all day for fear of other men taking advantage. Jealousy and possessiveness evolve this way. Only children with paternal investment have a greater chance of survival. This theory was called the daddy-at-home theory by Jared Diamond. Scholars supporting the monogamy hypothesis need to answer a question. Since human nature is monogamous, how do you explain the occurrence of marital infidelity now? This is because human life has a fundamental tension. The tension between family life and community life. Other animals adopting monogamy, like gibbons, do not live a community life. Where we humans differ is, we organize core families based on monogamy. And then this core family is embedded in a larger community. We live both a family life and a community life. This is a fundamental tension of human existence. On the one hand, we need to form a monogamous core family. At the same time, we also need to live a community life. Humans are able to form large-scale flexible cooperation. Able to form common imaginations to build communities transcending blood relations. Living both a family life and a community life. The neighbors living next door. It's inevitable that Mrs. White next door will ask you to help fix a computer or a water pipe. Going back and forth, it's easy to spark a flame. Overall, cheating, like monogamy, is unavoidable. This is a byproduct of the fundamental tension of human existence. Monogamy is the mainstream. Cheating is the byproduct. With the development of modern communication technology, this byproduct may be exacerbated. Previously, there were only a limited number of neighbors like Mrs. White. And it was inconvenient to enter and exit Mrs. White's house under the watchful eyes of other neighbors. Now you turn on your phone and it's full of Mrs. Whites. This is the introduction to the monogamy hypothesis. In this episode, we introduced 3 hypotheses about prehistoric human mating methods. The polygyny hypothesis believes prehistoric humans were polygynous. The group marriage hypothesis believes prehistoric humans were promiscuous. The monogamy hypothesis believes prehistoric humans were monogamous. If the belief in love is built on the foundation of ignorance, then such love is actually fragile. Romain Rolland said, "True heroism lies in loving life even after recognizing the truth of life. The more we can understand the instincts endowed to us by fate, the more we can break free from the limitations brought to us by biological instincts." Kant said, "What is enlightenment? Enlightenment is the courage to use one's own reason." Or to put it more simply, enlightenment is daring to know. We welcome you to join the philosophers in the discussion of this issue. Their views have been expressed. Now it is your turn to speak. Please publish your views in the comments section below the video. Thank you for watching until here. I believe you are also a friend who loves independent thinking in life. I hope you will like, subscribe, and share. This is very important to me. I look forward to seeing you next time.